Now, for more on how economies on the African continent are changing, we welcome Stephen Hayes. He is the president and CEO of the Corporate Council on Africa. Stephen, thanks very much for joining us.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Let's talk about what is fueling the economic growth in Africa right now.
Well, I think, quite frankly, China's entry into the market was a wake-up call to a lot of countries, and I think that more than anything else has changed the dynamics. It's the largest emerging market, although you can say there's 54 markets, but it's the major emerging market now, and the funds are going to emerging markets.
Nigeria and South Africa's economies are doing well right now. Is that enough to drag the rest of the continent along with it? Because clearly there are a lot of economies suffering greatly.
It's not enough. Certainly those two economies are way ahead of everybody else, no doubt about it. Kenya is coming, but not nearly the same extent as Nigeria and South Africa. But again, even if you take those countries, you still have 75% of the population of the continent left out. So it's where it can change is regionalization. South Africa can take the southern cone with it, under certain circumstances. Nigeria certainly will take West Africa with it as well, and that's going to be the major changes, I think.
Yeah, and the West largely has stayed away from East Africa. You know, you have to think back on the military tragedies that the U.S. Suffered there, and that prompted a lot of people to take a hands-off. But China is very active in investing in that area. Do you see other nations jumping in?
Well, yes, the Gulf states certainly. The Arab states are big investors, especially in East Africa, but all over. Turkey has become a major investor, particularly in construction. Japan on infrastructure. Of course, Japan is there because they're worried about China. So, and the competition there. So it's changed the whole dynamics of Africa.
You know, we talked briefly in our preview story about the rivalry, if you will, between Nigeria and South Africa. Are we making too much out of it?
No, there is a real rivalry. Both are very prideful nations. They both feel that they should be leading. South Africa, because of its history and because of its constitution, feels that it's more advanced. Economically, it has been in infrastructure. Nigeria, though, is the most populous nation and more central to African nations, frankly, too, feels that it should be leading. So there is that rivalry.
Is it good for Africa?
I think it's both good and bad. I mean, I don't think it matters who's really number one, but we all like to say we're number one, whether we are or not.
Sure.
I think that the rivalry probably hurts a little more than helps Africa right now. I think they need to be pulling together, but I don't think that's going to happen.
You know, some statistics really jumped out at me. You know, China has been the economic engine driving the global economy. The U.S. has been chugging along, doing okay. Studies I've seen show that Africa's economies have a chance of outpacing Asia's in the oncoming years. Well, is that going to be enough to drive the global economy?
It will help, but what's different in Africa is the division of wealth. Nigeria is growing tremendously, as is Angola, faster than almost any other countries in the continent. But when you have such a division between rich and poor and a very small middle class, there's still a long way to go.
And it's an artificial economy in many ways. You need that middle class to have a very solid.
And I think that's where the United States ought to concentrate also, is building the middle class. I don't think we can compete with China in the same way, but I think building the middle class is key to African development.
Let's get on to, you talked about the Chinese investment in Africa. Excuse me, I apologize for that. You talked about the Chinese investment in Africa. Do you see the U.S. really stepping up and getting more involved in that?
I think the U.S. private sector is becoming more involved. I don't think it can compete in the same way. I don't think it can compete in the same way with China. China works from a top down, taking the countries as is. OECD rules are very different from the way China plays.
Right.
And that's been a major difference.
Quickly, you talked about your organization. Really, any U.S. company that's going to dip its toe into Africa is going to come through you guys. How do you see yourself positioning in the coming years?
I think we have to link more with private sector organizations. There are some very viable ones, particularly in Nigeria and South Africa. And I think we need to work concentrating on developing partnerships between U.S. and African companies. And there's a very vibrant African economy developing.
Stephen Hayes, thanks very much for joining us. Sorry about that phone call. Clearly, people were very excited about what you had to say.
Well, thank you.
Okay, thanks again.